Good afternoon, welcome. I'm Hal Meng with the Center for Food Preservation Arts, and I'd like to welcome you to another one of our virtual canning parties. This week, it's the first week of June, and here in the Puget Sound area of Washington, the cherries are coming in, the very first load of them. Washington is one of the major producers of cherries in the United States. In the Northwest here, we have over 9 different kinds of sweet cherries. Now, there are several kinds of cherries. There are the sweet cherries, which are represented by the most familiar are the red, or the Bing cherries. And those are pretty much available in one variety or another all the way from June through almost the end of August. And then there are the yellow cherries, which are sweeter, and they're represented by the Rainier cherry in Washington. And then there are also pie cherries, but Washington State is not a major producer of the tart or pie cherries. Those are grown more in Minnesota, New York, and Oregon. And those are not usually sold fresh unless you're near one of the producers. They're usually canned for pie fillings or sold as frozen for pie fillings. So today, to get us ready for the onslaught of all these different kinds of cherries, we're going to talk about the many different ways there are to pit cherries. Today I'm going to start with the more elaborate, which would be some kind of a pitter that you buy. Now this one is disassembled. This one is a relatively inexpensive one by the Useful Company. And they all work with plungers of some kind to come in and push the cherries out. So the plunger fits in like that. And this is assembling just this particular kind. Spring goes on. And it isn't because the camera's on. I always have problems getting this started. It's just me. And so now, see, it's ready to go. But you want to put in this kind of a gasket that'll help keep the cherries from falling all the way through. And then it has its own container, and it has one of these suction cups, which makes it easy to attach it to a surface. So you put the cherries into the tray. And they all come out with a pretty clean hole. And the pits collect. Now that's really useful when you're doing a whole lot of cherries, because the more you put in here until it's up to the top, the more gravity feeds them through. Then, this was one that was given to me. It looks like some kind of a thing you'd find in a doctor's office, but this is by the company Pampered Chef. So you know it's like solid stainless steel, all those good things. But there are a lot of hand ones. There are ones that are plastic, there are ones that are metal like this. It just so these are all things that cost you some money to get. There are plenty of other possibilities. Now, one of my favorite ones is the beer bottle one. At great sacrifice, I went out and bought a couple of beers. and emptied it, removed the label. I don't want to be commercializing. But this, if you are familiar with an apple core, they usually come a little bigger, about the size of my thumb. I found on Amazon a set of these that go all the way from this size down to even smaller. But the reason for the narrow opening bottle is you put your cherry in there, and it comes out like a little plug. Now, there's an even smaller one than this, but it makes it a little bit harder. Now, if you don't have one of these, if you have a good solid chopstick, like these that are made to look like ivory, but they're actually a very strong plastic, these require a little bit of cleanup after you've popped it out. Now, if you're doing a whole lot of cherries, these are fairly fast. This, of course, is probably the fastest once you get the hang of it. But the advantage of using this method, if you're doing a lot of cherries, is I recommend that after every pound or two that you do, you have another beer. Then on the same theme, which I did not believe that this worked at all, but it actually does. You take and open up a paper clip. You just unbend it. It's a little more time consuming because it requires some technique, but one of the things that this is good for, if you really get the technique down, which I saw on a video on the internet, is you basically can hollow out the cherry, and then they were taking like a whipped cream and stuffing them and making them as decorations on top of things. It looked delicious. I mean, it was a little vanilla flavored. And some of the others, techniques that are available, getting less fancy, would be, of course, just taking your paring knife and very carefully scoring around and twisting, and then popping the pit out. Or, if any of you have done the thing with garlic cloves, where you lay it down and just crush it. And then if this was a garlic clove, all the skin, the papery skin comes off. But with these, sometimes you'll see a recipe with preserves or said that says crush the cherries. Well, this eliminates a couple of other steps. You can pit it and crush it at the same time. And then the very last one that I'd like to show you is, suppose there are lots of cherries on sale, but you don't have time to do much with them. If you wash them thoroughly and freeze them, they freeze very well, but then when you defrost them, when you're getting ready to use them, they just pop open. So that's the easiest and fastest in a lot of different ways, and the least expensive. So now that we've shown you several different ways that you can prepare your cherries, in some of the next upcoming sessions, we'll be making some different kinds of cherry jam, like a cherry almond. So thank you very much for joining us today, and please come back to our virtual canning parties.